Welcome to Talent Talk today. My name is Carl Kutsmode. I'm the SVP of Talent Consulting at TalentRise in Chicago. We're an executive search and talent consulting firm. And today I will be speaking with a good friend of mine, Adam Seger, who will share some of the innovative things he and his colleagues did in the restaurant business to survive the COVID-19 pandemic that we're hopefully emerging from today. So I'm going to start out by turning it over to Adam. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your current role, and your company, Lush. Adam?
Yeah, my name is Adam Seger, and I'm operating partner for Lush Food and Drink in Chicago, Chicagoland. We have 2 locations in Chicago and 1 in Evanston. And I joined the company in the summer of 2019 when we were Lush Wine and Spirits. At that point, we were in our 14th year in business, and we're a very innovative restaurant company in that each of the restaurants is inside of a boutique wine shop with a craft cocktail bar. And so a guest can come in and certainly have all the offerings of a restaurant and also buy a bottle of wine, try a cocktail. If they like the cocktail or they like the spirits in it, they can actually go and buy the bottle of spirits. And actually, there's a little bit of, we call it test driving, instead of going into a shop and wondering what a wine or spirit tastes like, to be able to have a taste of it before you buy. So that was pre-pandemic. And at that point, we're a very unique, innovative company. And as the pandemic started, luckily about 2 weeks before the pandemic, we had a terrible website before, just a very, very poor website, no e-commerce, anything like that. And we found a great web person just a couple of weeks before the pandemic. We didn't know, obviously, that the world was going to halt for a couple of years. And thank goodness for that, because we went from a packed 3 concepts to essentially the city saying, all right, no more restaurants. And we also had one other unique thing that was a strategic advantage for us, in that we were a retailer and a restaurant. And we also, because of some early decisions, we were also considered an essential business. So when other restaurants closed, we started selling fresh produce. And the way this came about was from our produce monger, Tom Cornell, 5th generation produce company. He's 4th generation, his son and daughter are the 5th generation. His whole business model was fine dining restaurants in Chicago. He had no retail. And so when the restaurants shut down, he called me. I've known him for years in a panic. This is a gentleman who sold all the produce to Trotters for the vegetable cookbook, and he sells to Alinea and Next and everyone. And he went from the produce guy for all the star chefs to zero. And he called up and he was in a panic because he said, I'm responsible for my great-grandfather's company, and I don't want it to shutter under my watch. And so I said, well, we have 3 locations. We have 3 huge bars in these places. Guests cannot sit at the bars, and we already use your produce. Let's set up a little farm market in the stores. We need an excuse for people to come in. We have people come.
And more people and everybody's cooking at home, or at least trying to cook at home, right?
Right, they're trying to cook at home. And when they're going to grocery stores, you're watching on the news and empty grocery store shelves. You've got people packed in line at Costco. So the disease is spreading more. It's hard to social distance. And meanwhile, we have these empty stores. And so we, of course, did all the social distancing and the mask and whatnot. Yet what we did is we just got all this fresh produce and put it out on our bars. And because our businesses are very, very neighborhood driven, as far as we have the more than 50% of our business are people that walk from the neighborhoods. Yeah. They were so refreshed, get out in fresh air, not stuck in their car, and walk over and buy some fresh produce. And invariably, everyone was drinking. If they drank a little bit before the pandemic, they drank a lot more wine during it. And they come get their tomatoes, and we were selling fresh bread, and invariably they'd grab a bottle of wine. And then it just worked. And it wasn't enough to certainly be running in the black. It was enough to keep cash flow coming in and keep our employees getting hours. And so they had their income continuing.
I think you pointed out the ability to be nimble, to think creatively, to think out of the box, look at what you have in your business, where do you have unutilized assets or unutilized opportunity, and then partnering with a vendor who was obviously trying to figure this out at the same time as everybody was, and creatively coming up with a solution that was a win-win for everybody, including the customer. So it just goes to show you that being small and nimble and being creative can have huge benefits to getting through something like this. And this probably won't be the first time we experience something like this. So now you've got a playbook to run in the future.
It really is, and we got certainly some inspirational help from other restaurateurs and seeing what other really smart folks were doing. For instance, Paul Kahan's group, One Off Hospitality, with Blackbird and Avac and Big Star and et cetera. They've always been driven very much by these small farms that produce incredible ingredients. And obviously Paul and his team are great chefs, yet having access to really great ingredients is obviously going to elevate everything. And I was reading a little bit about what they were doing, and they were continuing to purchase produce from their farmers, even though they were trying to figure out what are we going to do with this, with their thought of, if we don't, at some point, the pandemic's going to end. We don't know when. And we need that farmer to still be in business, because at some point we're going to come out of this and restaurants are going to get busy again. Yep. And it was that at about the same time we were doing this with Tom Cornel. And then we started doing it with other small producers. And we may not be able to keep them in the black during this, but with PPP funds and a lot of creativity, at least if there's some cash flow coming in and they can keep their core team, then God willing, the business will be there when this eventually ends. And
so you address the supply chain issue by partnering with your supply chain to keep them in business and have faith in your business that it will get through this. It will be temporary. And then, you mentioned the talent side of the business. You want to at least keep the good people you've trained employed at whatever level you're able to afford to do so until things start to turn around. So what other talent related decisions did you have to make that were kind of, innovative or different than others in the industry during that critical time?
Well, we made a decision to operate in the red for a pretty long time, because our business is quite unique in that we're both a restaurant and retail and craft bar. And we have hundreds of wines and unique craft spirits and all this kind of thing. It takes a lot of knowledge and skill for someone to work at Lush. And even in the kitchen, they're open kitchens, and the kitchen team is expected to have a certain amount of social skills and basic wine knowledge and whatnot. And so we knew if we didn't keep that core team, not only from the skill set, also from the culture, because when you come into Lush, you are literally looking at hundreds and hundreds of unique wines and products. And it can be a very, very scary place if you're not greeted by a warm, gracious person who offers you a taste of something and kind of pulls you into our nerdy world. And so we knew that it was both going to be very hard to replace the amount of training it would be to get to close and get a new team, and also to keep that core culture going.
Yeah.
And we knew at some point people are going to be incredibly hungry and thirsty, not only for food and drink, also just for socialization, that it would be so much easier to reopen or come back versus close and reopen. And we just kind of heard nightmares about restaurants that had closed, and then the restrictions came off and they had such a difficult time finding staff. And even we found as we had team members quarantine, as throughout, there was almost always someone who was quarantining, or we had someone called and was exposed, and then I was the contact tracer, and then we'd have multiple folks who were quarantining to try and contain this and stay open. We found even folks that had just quarantined for 10 days to 2 to 3 weeks and then came back to work. It took some time for them to get back used to being around humans again.
Yeah.
And it's just the stress of being out of your basement where everyone else is. And we thought, my gosh, if it's that difficult just when someone's quarantining, we couldn't imagine closing a store and how hard it would be to reopen. So that was kind of helped with, we call it the best bad decision, is let's give everyone hours. Let's try and have as much revenue and new revenue centers as we can to keep some cash flow going, just knowing that's going to be the best long-term decision. And it was also having owners who were involved and being privately held, that was a luxury. We didn't have investors who were who didn't understand, who did not have a long-term outlook. If we did, I don't think it would have been possible to do what we did.
You know, it's kudos to making those decisions and betting on yourself, on your business model, and on the staff that you had. You valued them, you valued the culture that you worked hard to build. And as a result, you've probably ingrained loyalty from that staff for eons to come. I mean, you know, a lot of their friends in the industry were probably seeing mass layoffs and then pivoting and trying to figure out how they were going to pay their rent. And looking for jobs in a pandemic was not exactly easy. Fortunately, the government assistance helped a lot of people, gave them a little bit of a cushion. But when that ended, you know, to your point, everybody started to hire people back, and some people realized they didn't really want to go back into the jobs they were in. So it made it all the more hard for people in your industry to get people to come back to the jobs if they've had that epiphany that they want to do something different. I think this is a really great story. If you think back to, you know, looking back at anything that you would have done differently, is there anything you can point to or a lesson learned, you know, had you gone back and rewound?
I think we definitely would have been, if going back doing this again, I wish we were more transparent with what was going on, kind of the big picture financially. So we were nervous about sharing too much, because for an employee going through the incredible stress of just working during pandemic and all of that and whatnot, at the time, we didn't let everyone know that we're losing money every day we're open.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, when we eventually did tell our team that, after this has been happening for a long time, they were shocked. They just assumed that, well, we have people coming in. Yet the way our business model changed, we went to prepared foods and retail prepared foods and very labor intensive meal kits for Valentine's and Easter and things and whatnot. So everyone was very, very busy in bottling cocktails and all these kind of things. So everyone felt like, all right, well, we're busy, yet the margins on those are dramatically less than a restaurant margin as far as your food and beverage costs, which are already kind of low. And I think had we communicated that a bit more, we would have gotten even more ideas from our team. Yeah. And once we did start to communicate that, it was amazing how many ideas came from within, because the folks working, they wanted us to survive, because they wanted to both continue the income during the pandemic, and they wanted to know that they had a secure job when they came out. And they had so many more ideas on how to bring a little bit more revenue or be a little bit more efficient with costs and whatnot. And had we shared what was really going on behind the scenes financially earlier, I think we would have, well, not I think, I know we would have gotten more ideas from them earlier than we had been a little too cautious. So that was definitely a rewind thing that I would have wished we did a little differently. Or we did it eventually, but I think if we did it earlier, we would have gotten more ideas and sped our recovery more quickly.
Yep, no, it makes sense. And I think you're not alone. I think a lot of business owners, in fact, our company as well, has sat back and thought through the last 24 months to say, okay, what did we do well? What did we do, you know, poorly? And what could we do differently in the future? So I guess looking to the future, you know, obviously some of those ideas would be something you'd take forward should another pandemic or crisis happens that impacts your business. But, you know, is there anything else you would like to do to prepare for that in the future while you have the luxury of time to do so?
I would say definitely share information with your team of what is going on and what you're trying. We tried a lot of crazy things that we never thought we would before, and a number of them worked and a number of them did not work. And yet we basically have a kind of an internal weekly team newsletter, and said, all right, here's what we're trying this week.
Yep.
And literally we had a period of time, and this was an idea from one of our team members. We started to sell toilet paper because she's a work from home mom, and she was kind of doing part-time. And she said she had literally gotten in a brawl with another mother at Target over the last toilet paper. And yet the restaurant suppliers had warehouses full of toilet paper, but because of the broken distribution system, the restaurant suppliers don't sell to retail and vice versa. And rather than those two entities communicating, hey, we have warehouses full of food and toilet paper, there's no shortage, it's just in the wrong place and we don't have a mechanism to get it to retail. We said, well, we can get as much toilet paper as we want. And invariably it got people to come in, and just about anybody who bought a roll of toilet paper for $1 also bought a bottle of wine. And so it was something as an upscale concept. We would never think of doing a toilet paper display in the window, yet it got people in the door, it made people laugh a little bit, and it got us all to think outside the box, not take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things we tried, some of them didn't work, and yet enough did, that it gave us that confidence of, let's innovate, let's see what works. And if it doesn't, we learn something. And that's something we definitely took away. I think we're a stronger business and a stronger team and more nimble now, having gotten through this. We're definitely a better business than we were going into the pandemic. And it forced us to do a lot of those things of, let's figure out how to have an online presence. Let's figure out how to engage more with our social media. Let's figure out how to sell tickets in advance for events versus wonder how many people are going to come for a special event. All those things we would not be doing now had we not gone through that 2 to 3 years.
Well, it certainly sounds like, the common theme there is don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to try something you would never have thought about or you would have shot down in the past, and learn from, what worked and what didn't, and leverage it
Yes.
going into the future. So how has that positioned your business today? Aside from all the lessons learned, do you see business rebounding at 80% or 100% of where it was, or is it still somewhere in between?
Where we're seeing a spike is in catering and private events. And two of the leaps of faith during the pandemic, we purchased our real estate for 2 of our 3 locations. And we were able to get them at a very unique price point when no other sane person was going out, I'm going to buy more restaurant space. And we knew if eventually this is going to end and space would be at a premium. And these were an opportunity for, instead of putting money towards a lease or rent every month, we're putting it towards a mortgage. So at least we're building equity. And so that decision allowed us to have a lot more control over than reinvesting business. And so about halfway through the pandemic, we started a rebranding from Lush Wine and Spirit to Lush Food and Drink, because we had been really known as a retailer that kind of had food, and we really wanted to be known as a restaurant company that has this unique retail. And that has really helped us as we've purchased our real estate. We've also added private event space. And now as Lush Food and Drink, it's really driven forward our catering and event business, which is gangbusters. And talking to other executives and other restaurant companies, they're doing as much more catering business, much more than pre-pandemic, because all of the weddings, bar mitzvahs, anniversaries, birthdays, all these things that couldn't happen have been delayed. And so now they're having them, and folks are we're having people do events for the sake of doing an event to get together with friends they hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
So that business is way beyond what it was even pre-pandemic.
Rebound socialization. People are craving
Really
connection again. Thank you again, Adam.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Take care.
All right. Cheers.